What is the magic of the hearth, and what does it mean for society that we've lost it? Welcome to Mythic Mirror, a podcast for fans of myth and fantasy who want to live a magical, fulfilling life. I'm your host, Mary C. Kehoe.
And I'm your co-host, Carolina Carter.
And today we are talking about hearth magic, what it is, why it's important, where it's gone.
I did a little bit of a deep dive into hospitality customs, specifically Norse, Irish, Greek, and Japanese. Just very interesting that it used to be, I call it a custom, but it was treated more as a law, that if you were not hospitable to guests in your home, that you were pretty much punished for it, or you lost status within your community. Um, and it's interesting to look because initially when I was looking at the Nordic ones, I was thinking, well, to turn someone out, to turn someone away from your home is pretty much a death sentence if you're living in a colder climate. But it doesn't really matter because, in Greece, it's obviously a much more tepid climate and they had still strict hospitality laws, a lot of them tying to religion. Norse mythology, they would often wonder if it was Odin in disguise. Zeus was sometimes seen as the god of hospitality and would punish those who didn't treat their guests correctly. Um, in Japan, I hope I say this right, but they had these omotenashi, which is where you try to anticipate your guests' needs. And it's like I don't want to say like status symbol, but sort of is like an and um I think I got lost in the sauce there, but basically that it used to be a very solid pillar of the human condition, this this hospitality rule, kind of, that like, should a guest come to your home, you must feed them, you must give them shelter, you must clothe them, and also in return the guest must not abuse that in any way, can't overstay your welcome. So looking at that in regards to the modern world and how much has changed and what we've really lost, because um, I mean, if you even just look up the word hospitality, what comes up is everything in the hospitality industry. It's lost its meaning almost in the sense of community.
Yeah, and I think not only have we lost the sense of personal hospitality, but we've lost the sense of home. I think you can't have, or at least the law of hospitality doesn't mean as much if the essence of home isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I think along with the decline of this custom of hospitality is the decline of the belief of, your home is your castle, it's ownership, you're the um
The steward.
but yeah, the decline of, if you don't honor your home as something worth opening up and giving, then, if it's just the place that you happen to live at this time, it kind of takes the roots and depth out of the law of hospitality.
Hmm. Interesting.
And I love that you deep dived into that aspect, because I went with hearth and the hearth spirits aspect, and it's the same thing where across the world you have these beings, these spirits of the hearth, and how a lot of the times they're honored in the same way of you're taking some of your food that you make for the family and you feed some into the fire. There's the Domovoi in Russia, the Penates in Rome, which are also kind of the gods of the family, the Demispatis in Lithuania. And then you've also got the Bubach in Wales, which that one can become mischievous if you don't feed it and honor it. And I think that's another thing we can take into the modern understanding of the hearth is this aspect, this idea of feeding the hearth spirit is it symbolizes kind of how humans put essence into things. You're imbuing the sacred into the matter. And without that human giving life into the home, there is no spirit, there is no being in your hearth, and you don't actually need, a lot of houses now don't have fireplaces. We don't cook on a fire anymore, so you don't have that central point of heat and food and community in the home anymore. But you can create a similar feeling in, whether it's a room or a corner of a room or something, picking a spot that is the heart of your home and you treat it as such. And I think the more love you give to your home and, feed the home spirit in whatever way you want, there's plenty of different modern takes on these folklore traditions, but I don't really think me doing an internet search and telling you about it is helpful. I think that's something each person can create and have meaningful for themselves. But I think it does matter, and the more you love the home, the more you can open that up as the hospitality to those around you.
I feel like the modern day equivalent of the domovoi, is that what you said was the Russian? Is the Roomba. I feel like that's the little being that people humanize and care for. That's like closest we've come to our little house spirit that we care for.
So now take that feeling for the Roomba and give that feeling to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And, give your house a name. And I have this great quote that I found after we picked this topic, but I thought it so perfectly encapsulates what we are missing out on. And one of the reasons we love fantasy, I think cozy fantasy obviously really captures this, but I think a lot of other fantasy has this feeling, and that they, in these stories you still have that ancient law of hospitality, and there's something in us that yearns for that yearns for this feeling of home and hearth, whether our own or being welcomed into someone else's. So this is a quote from a French philologist and medievalist, Claude Lecouteux, and he says, "We have been transformed into rootless wanderers, with no fire or place to call our own. The individual no longer has any attachment to a house that has been passed down for generations. In losing all of this, we have lost a piece of ourselves, one of our most solid anchors, and like dead leaves carried by the wind, we settle one day here and the next day there, driven by the whims of our professions. But we no longer bring the embers from our hearths with us, and the surviving spirits weep in abandoned houses." What do you think of that?
What do you think? Some of that might be due to a loss of craftsmanship. I mean, you've got sort of like these little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky tacky, or is that a weak excuse? If you're living like in an HOA that only has certain architectural builds approved, and your house looks like the neighbor's house, looks like the neighbor's house, looks like the neighbor's house, and your floors sag because they were built poorly, and they're all painted beige. But that's not the house's fault.
Right. I don't think that helps, and I don't think the rent culture helps either when you don't actually feel like you own the place that you're in, and your landlord can say at any time, all right, that's it, or raise the rent, you got to leave. But I think even with those conditions, even when people in ancient times had to travel, had to move, had to leave everything, that idea of taking the embers with you, obviously we don't take physical embers with us, but energetically, emotionally we can, um, and find something. It's not like it has to, it's this doesn't depend on money. It's not about buying something that makes you feel like home. It's you the feeling of home comes from the people. You're the people who fed the domovoi are the ones who strengthened it. It didn't have to do with the fireplace that it was in.
Hmm, that's a good
and
point.
and so, yeah, so I think it's a lot easier to create this feeling when you're in a, a beautiful home that feels like a good representation of you. But I think we can create that within whatever structure we are in at the time. And I just love that idea of carrying the embers with you. You can create a home wherever you are. It's like the ancient people who would carry their altars with them.
Mm.
They would set up their tents, or if they were in colder climates, build huts or whatever, but they brought with them that hearth, that the altar or whatever their distinct culture had.
And taking that further into sharing your hearth and home with people, the hospitality aspect, do you feel like that same sort of art has been lost because of that loss of that spark, that loss of ownership, or is it something else?
I think that's definitely part of it. And I think, to me, the root of hospitality is love. And I had a realization today because I was thinking about this, and it's a lot easier to love the people you're not going to meet. It's a lot easier for me to imagine loving strangers out there in the world. I don't have to know their idiosyncrasies. um,
Mm.
and, loving the faceless crowd. But then if you think about welcoming in that annoying neighbor, or the person at work that drives you nuts, or, the guy at the store that you always see, who for some reason you can't stand. Just random people in your own community. If you imagine welcoming them in, how do you do that? Because those are the people you'd be welcoming in.
Yeah, I thought about this. I This is not an original thought, but this has been something that's been on my mind a couple years back. When you're in your early 20s, everybody's always driving each other to the airport, and at some point, one of my friends was like, "Oh, we're adults now. We can park and pay for parking. We don't need to be getting rides to the airport. That's embarrassing." And I was like, "No, I think that's. I think you like. I feel like hospitality has been commodified to the extent that we no longer have that sense of community where it's like, well, I shouldn't ask for help because I can just pay for it. Like I shouldn't, I shouldn't reach out because I can just buy it. And I fully disagree. And I think I love driving people to the airport and seeing them off on their adventure or picking them up when they come home. And it's not easy. It's not like it's always going to be an inconvenience. But and this is not an original thought. I apologize. I don't remember the first person I heard it from. It's probably on TikTok. Um, but they said that the price of community is inconvenience, and so it's never going to feel. I feel like I don't know, the popularization of therapy speak where people are very into drawing boundaries, and I'm very into drawing boundaries. Please don't get me wrong. But I think you can draw them so well that you fence yourself in and isolate yourself. And I think a little inconvenience is good for us.
Yeah, that is a perfect lead into the revelation I had. Because
Hmm.
I was thinking about that with boundaries and love. I just got this thought of, be patient with the children. Why can't I be patient with the adult? And it's because I expect more from them. But if I just love them and be patient with them as I do with a child, that gives us that grace to be hospitable, to be welcoming, to be loving. And then the question is, but then how do you stop yourself from just like feeling superior? Like, well, I'm going to treat you all as children
Hmm.
because that's what you are. Um, and the next thought that came to me was, it's the personal identity, the human self, our, what we've created in this life is the child compared to the soul, compared to the immortal self. And, if you believe in the idea that a part of you was alive before this life and goes on, then this human identity is a child to that self. So, in that sense, we are all children. So then, if I can love someone and be patient with them with the understanding that I'm being patient with the human identity while still honoring the light, it's still honoring the immortal self, that's also there that can shine through, which is the way I think of children, because a lot of times with especially toddlers, you have this force of nature, a very powerful being coming through a very small human who is trying to figure out this human self, and how it works and why they can't do everything that they want to do, and how do you communicate with other humans. They're very demanding, they're very this, they're very that, and you teach them empathy, you teach them boundaries. So in that sense, you can love them and be patient without getting rid of healthy boundaries. You still have healthy boundaries with a toddler because you're teaching them how to be a good human. So it's the same thing with your neighbors. You can love them, welcome them, and have boundaries.
Discworld Delight is the delight I might try for myself. 'Cause it's a disc, and it's a world, and it's a disc world. Oh, you're back. Hello.
Well, that sounded lovely. Do we have any guesses for last week?
Mary, we have a very good guess for last week. Wintersmith.
That is the correct guess.
That's such a good guess.
For this week, if the ducks would be quiet for a moment. Have they no respect?
They don't have any respect. It's a well-known fact about ducks.
Do you think there's such a thing as a criminal mind? Carrot almost audibly tried to work this out. What? You mean like Mr. Cut Me Own Throat Dibbler, sir? He's not a criminal. You have you have eaten one of his pies, sir? I mean, yes, but he's just geographically divergent in the financial hemisphere. Sir, I mean, he just disagrees with other people about the position of things, like money. He thinks it should all be in his pocket. No, I meant. Vimes closed his eyes and thought about smoke and flowing drink and laconic voices. There were people who'd steal money for there were people who would steal money from people. Fair enough. That was just theft. But there were people who, with one easy word, would steal the humanity from people. That was something else. Clearly, Vimes and Carrot are in this book.
Spoiler.
But what is it?
What is it?
I love what you said about not fencing yourself in, of that commodifying of hospitality to the point where it feels like you're being used or using someone to help them in any way, which is a huge erosion of community. And I was just watching a video of a woman in Russia showing her village life, and she was saying how this woman who has the best garden in the village, and this is a village that still has, wells that you crank up for water, and it's probably much better water than 98% of the world. But she was saying how this older woman can't go out and forage anymore, but she loves it. She loves the berries and the fruit trees, and gathering all of the fruit and mushrooms and nuts and everything, but she can't do it anymore. So they go out, and when they go out foraging, they bring it to her, and they said, we have the physical ability to go foraging in the woods, but we don't have a lot of time. So they bring all of their foraged goods to her, and she does all the preservation of it. She processes all the plums and berries and apples and everything. And then they share with her they take some and she takes some. So there's that the give and take of community that doesn't have to be uh, commodified.
Like a knock at the door now is met with suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of representative, I think, of how we greet the unknown. And maybe it's just because we have so much information at our fingertips with the internet, with phones, that a stranger knocking at the door would be a more welcome, like, interlude into your day
Mm-hmm.
in a slower time. But now it's like if somebody didn't text that they're coming over. I'm the worst at this. If I hear a knock at the door, I go over to the window and peek out so they can't see me, but I can see who it is. And then I usually don't answer the door. And I also greet the unknown with the same suspicion and fear. I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared of deep water that I can't see the bottom of. I don't like the unknown.
So it used to be if you hear a knock on the door, it is either someone within your community who you know, but the majority of the time it's going to be someone you know. And there was more of a pattern of coming to each other's door.
Mm-hmm.
And or it would be a stranger, but there is that law and that tradition. So even if this person, you don't need to know who this person is because they're going to be following the rules set out.
Right.
They will respect the law as much as you will. You will open your home
Mm-hmm.
or at least your barn,
Right.
depending on the culture, but they will also not steal or harm you
Right.
for that same reason.
And it wasn't like a traveler a day. I think travel was more of a novelty. It wasn't Nicole Trust Funder, you know, going through the wilderness for her gap year. Not that there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
any of that, but you just like, I think there's maybe some more built in prejudice now because we know too much about people. Whereas before, if you were just a traveler, it was a novelty. You didn't know them. You didn't know if they were a good person. You just knew that you had rules and they had rules, and this is just the way the world worked.
And travel took a lot longer. You stayed along the road, and there weren't, there were inns with taverns and such, but you could also work your way through.
Mm-hmm.
If this trip is going to take 3 months to get from point A to point B, and you don't have the money to stay at an inn for 3 months, there's the understanding of you work as you go. Oh, I've come to this farm.
Mm-hmm.
I'll help with the seeding. I'll help with the harvest, whatever it is as you move through.
And there just weren't as like there were inns, but you would have to be in some sort of township and there was a great distance between them. They come to the door. Is there an inn nearby? There ain't no inn for 30 miles. May I sleep in your barn tonight?
That was really good.
Thank
I want to read the rest of that book.
you.
Now, there are times in history and fiction where the sacred law of hospitality was not kept.
Mm-hmm. I think most popular one, obviously, being the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, Throne of Games.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously, if you break the rules of hospitality, murder and mayhem.
Yeah, it can go really bad really fast.
Mm-hmm. And may death come for you.
And a huge example of that out of history would have been the murder of Glencoe, which happened in 1692, which was soldiers staying with Clan MacDonald, and they had been staying there for like 2 weeks at this point, turned on the family and killed everyone.
Mm-mm. Which is why we
Yeah.
have the Fifth or Seventh Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
The one where soldiers can't stay in your home. Because people, the Revolutionary War, hospitality was still a thing. You'd have to house them.
And not only that, well, hospitality was still a thing, but also the king ordered it so that you could station soldiers in private homes. That was one of the intolerable acts
You'll
that
be back.
we rebelled against. We said no, thank you. So we don't have hospitality in America because of the King George and
Right.
his madness.
He ruined
That's what it comes
hospitality
down
in
to.
America.
Ruined everything.
If it wasn't for him, we'd be more hospitable, more hearth-centered, more hearth-centered. So, blame it on Mad King George. That's a bold stance, but I'm going to stand by it. Gotta have bold opinions in this world.
So that means we haven't finished rebelling against him. Once we have the hearth magic back in the home where it belongs,
Exactly.
we'll finally rid ourselves of the chains of the British monarchy.
I knew it. And with that, what was your spark of the week? Did you put a little spark in your hearth fire this week? I don't know why I'm doing voices today. I need to stop.
That might be my spark. So my spark of the week happened today. I actually went into the office to work today. which is very rare. And it was for a filming project, so I was set dressing the area, and it was just really nice because the it was just me and the cameraman setting it up, and it was just fun. And remembering that it's fun to work with people live once in a while. Working most of the time by myself and just seeing people through meetings and emails, I kind of forget how much I do like my coworkers.
I do like people.
I do like people. Speaking of hospitality,
Hmm.
what was your spark of the week this week?
I had a doctor's appointment and I did not want to go, and I was being a real baby about it, which we don't have to get into. But I had my husband and a very dear friend both go with me to the appointment and into the room, and it was hilarious. The nurse was like, "Are these guys with you?" And I was like, "Yup." And the doctor was like, "Okay, who's this?" And I was like, "This is my husband, and this is my friend." And they were all very nice about it, but it did make me feel a strong sense of community. It made me feel very loved, and I got through it. And I'm gonna live.
Whew, that's good.
Yeah. I think the key to having your hearth open is to have your heart open, and that we can rebuild these little fires.
Yeah, and carry the embers with us.
Hmm.
And speaking of loving people, we are so grateful to be spiraling through the universe with all of you. It's not always easy, but no good story ever is.